Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon. Today, we, the team of ISDR and team nv-Ratna, welcomes Mr. Ujjwal Rao. Mr. Ujjwal Rao is currently the CEO of Rector Healthcare, and he has 21 years of experience in this field, including 10 years as the healthcare provider and 11 plus years as developing and implementing the health technology in the EHRs, clinical decision support system and clinical outcomes analytics and telehealth, with remarkable outcomes in maternal and child health, health insurance fraud, waste abuse analytics, and the Center of Clinical Excellence. A sought-after thought leader, advisor and a mentor of PhD students with numerous publications, including a patent on physician quality and reliability scoring. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Sir, my first question would be, what do you think the future holds for the healthcare sector, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic?
That's the most important question, right? Where is health today and where is it going in the future? So the one thing is, healthcare is one of the oldest professions, and it will be one of the last professions, if you think about it, right? Because as humans, we get sick, we get healthy, correct? So currently healthcare is fragmented. That's what you keep reading about in the news. But what the future holds for health is that healthcare will change dramatically. So with the advent of, obviously, of technology, the other aspect is where you get care. So technically today, if you get sick, you go to the hospital, right? But slowly it's changing rapidly because healthcare is coming home. You can monitor many of the things that you can do in a hospital, in the ICU, hooked up to multiple machines, you can technically do at home today, right? So there's home healthcare. The other part, the changing dynamic is with how, we treat, we treat sick patients. We don't help people lead healthier lives for them to become healthier, right? So that's the other problem. So preventive health is something that's gonna, rapidly change the way we treat patients and how we look at healthcare as such. And the third part is with the advent of genomics and genetics. You would have heard of terms like precision medicine, personalized medicine. So currently healthcare is one size fits all. You get a bug in the stomach, you go to a doctor, they'll write you an antibiotic. Now it doesn't matter whether that antibiotic works for you or not. That's always a question, right? Many times you go to a doctor and say, this has not worked for me. That's because that drug is not, personalized to you. So in the future, you'll have all of these marked by genomic markers. So this is true in the case of cancer today, but slowly it will spread to all specialties. Like every disease you get, in some sense, is related to your genes, right? So that's the other part. I talked about the location not being the hospital. It can, go into your homes and other places. The second is the modality, the way we treat, like with drugs and stuff. That's going to change to more personalized ways and preventive. And the third part is the whole aspect of technology itself, with connectivity, with all of the 5G. You keep hearing about this. So healthcare is going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be there everywhere. So you don't need to go to a hospital. So that's one part. The other part is with your wearables, all of that, you're continuously monitoring your information, right? So tell me the one person who knows the disease the best, even better than a doctor, is the patient. Because the patient has one disease. The doctor knows about 100. The patient knows that one disease in and out, right? So patient empowerment. So that's the third thing. So the future is very bright for healthcare. Like I said, it's going to be one of the most preeminent professions as such, and obviously things will change, and the way we look at healthcare in its various inadequacies will obviously be overtaken, and we'll have a better state of healthcare with all the advancements as such. So that's my long answer to your short question.
So the second question comes, when someone says healthcare, it usually implies becoming a doctor or a nurse. Is this a limited view of the sector, and if so, what are we missing?
Yeah, so interestingly, I'm a victim of this actually. So I belong to a family of physicians, right? So, like in India, if you're born to a family of doctors, what is the next thing? They'll say you go become a doctor. So unfortunately, I'm a victim of that. I always wanted to be an engineer, right? But I mean, obviously, I studied medicine. I saw patients for managed hospitals for over a decade. But the thing is, actually, what I realized is when they say health and healthcare, the obvious thing is that you become a doctor and nurse, like you asked me. But now you've started to see that the ecosystem is expanding rapidly. You see a lot of people, like for example, this conference I'm attending is an AI conference, but me as a physician, I'm attending this amongst techies, right? Because there's a lot of data science applications in healthcare. And other than that, it's also the other people in the care team, as we call it. Like there's a team that takes care of patients, right? It's not just the doctor and the nurse. There's a physiotherapist, there's a occupational therapist, there's a dietitian, people who take care of OTs, people who take care of dialysis machines. So there are a lot of technicians, people who are engineers who are managing healthcare facilities, a pharmacist, obviously that's another traditional profession, but pharmacy is another growing area as such. So for being in healthcare, being a doctor or being a nurse is not the end of it all. If I would rather recommend somebody, because being a doctor or a nurse is a heavy burden. It's not a good life. I mean, you won't have a good quality of life, work-life balance as they call it, like long hours, 18-20 hours of work, going back late at night and things of that sort. But there are other places where you can contribute to healthcare, but be from a different domain, engineering, technicians and all of these places which contribute to the care team as such. So my recommendation to all youngsters is to look at healthcare beyond the just the traditional professions of doctor and nurse, essentially, right? Multiple opportunities.
Thank you so much for that answer, sir. Previously, biomedical engineers and medical technicians did not have much opportunities in India. What are your views on the current state and its potential growth on these technical domains?
So biomedical engineering, traditionally biomedical engineers as such used to take care of equipment in hospitals. You see these huge machines like CT scans, MRIs, OT, a lot of equipment. So traditionally it was their job to kind of take care of these equipment. But now with the advent of data science, the whole field is kind of now taking a new definition, because if you just look at the words itself, right, bio, medical and engineering, it combines three very critical aspects of healthcare as such. And now more and more opportunities are coming the way of biomedical engineers, which essentially can change the game, essentially, right? The other part is technicians, like I mentioned about cath lab technicians, OT, medical records and all of these places. Now, earlier, it was the case that you would have majority of our healthcare is provided by government hospitals, right? You go to a government hospital, now there's increasing number of private sector institutions coming up, and also startups in healthcare who require this kind of domain knowledge, right? So if somebody has like a startup technology on something related to operation theaters, what they'll do is they'll pick up people who are experienced in OT technology, right? And then help them build products essentially. So because of on that count and other factors, like in the private sector itself, there's so much of growth as such. So there's tremendous amount of opportunities for biomedical engineers, technicians, and all, generally all technical areas of health and healthcare as such.
Coming to the next question, artificial intelligence, data science are growing in prominence in healthcare. Could you explain in simple terms what these fields are and what skills are required to build a career in this field?
So interestingly, what we call artificial intelligence is not necessarily artificial, because at the end of it, there is a human driving that artificial intelligence, right? So I like to talk about intelligence augmentation, IA, as opposed to artificial intelligence, like, AI. So simply put, AI and data science, it deals with training computers to identify patterns, right? So if you open up your phone and you look at one of these apps, you take a picture and identifies this is a book, or or maybe you've gone onto a shopping app and it recommends certain items based on your past purchase history, right? So that's all, so to speak, it's called artificial intelligence. But essentially what it is taking data, training the computer to identify patterns, and then applying that trained application onto the trained algorithm, as they call it, into actual real world data. So in the case of healthcare, for example, if you go, there's a way for you to actually diagnose patients based on their scans, X-rays and CTs, right? So traditionally what will happen is you look at the scan and a doctor will say, oh, this looks like such and such lesion. But now what is happening is, if you say hundreds and thousands of scans, if you put into a computer, right, and tell the computer this is what a brain tumor looks like, so the next time you throw a real image at it, the computer will know that's what a brain tumor looks like. So simply put, it's taking data, training the computer on identifying patterns, and then applying that pattern or algorithm, as it's called, into the real world, essentially. So that's simply put. But from a skill set perspective, I think the idea of understanding patterns, numbers, mathematics, statistics, these are some of the quantitative sciences which are at the heart of artificial intelligence and data science. So I think that's the core skill required, is for you to be familiar with numbers, statistics, probability, and all of these things, and then apply that with a computer science background. But doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a software engineer to be a professionally. I'm a physician. I call myself a physician data scientist. So who comes from the domain, but is also able to look at data and create models and help engineers build those algorithms that I was talking about, right? So those are the basic skills, and I mean, obviously this is a burgeoning field, and it's going to expand rapidly in the next 10 or 20 years, and later there won't be a separate field called artificial intelligence. It's at the root of everything, essentially. Yeah.
That was very insightful, sir. So my next question would be, research in life sciences, especially genomics, which is a very promising study discipline. What are your views on its potential?
So life sciences research, if you look at the broad umbrella, overall life sciences is essentially everything to do with health and healthcare, and not just humans, right? If it's environment, it's animals, and all of this, like all living sentient beings, research into that potentially impacts the way we live as humans, right? So suppose there is an extinction of an animal, it eventually indirectly impacts us, right? If there is essentially a probably some sort of adulteration of some food source, for example, you might land up with food poisoning. So life sciences research is a very broad field, essentially, right? So it include organisms, microorganisms, like microbiology is one field, right? Then how you deal with antigens and antibodies, it's called immunology. How you fight with, you would have heard of COVID and antibodies and the vaccines, etc. So vaccinology and immunology is another big area, right, where you develop vaccines and stuff. And overall, I think even from an animal health perspective, right, there's a thing called zoonosis, where like COVID essentially is some sort of a zoonosis, meaning the animal infection comes into human beings, right? Like swine flu and all of these came from animals. So there's a big part of research happening into the animal health side, which has an impact on how health is dealt with, right? So overall, this is a very large field. And coming to the big point about genomic research, so there's a new technology called CRISPR, CRISPR, which essentially is, simplistically put, is cutting and pasting genes, right? So basically you have a bad gene for a certain disease, you cut it out, and then you replace it with a proper gene. I'm saying it very simplistically, but essentially that is going to change everything about what we know about medicine as such. So there's a huge amount of research going on in that field, and there's a need for new scientists to come in and take up research to advance that field as such. But to my previous point, right, about the future of healthcare, it's all personalized based on genomics, etc. So that's another huge area for and I would encourage youngsters to take up fields in science and life sciences research, because one, it's very rewarding. Second, it's the future, and three is it's at the end of it you will be impacting a life somewhere, right? So it's a very meaningful area to take up one's career in.
Coming to the next question, Indian healthcare infrastructure needs to be safer for patients, especially the differently able people. What can the youth do to ensure patients' safety?
So when we say infrastructure, it's essentially going to hospitals, right? I mean, the simplest thing is if you go to a hospital and if you're, say a loved one, your grandfather or somebody is on a wheelchair, and you suddenly find that there's no ramp to take the patient up the wheelchair. It's a very simple thing. So essentially, is being able to, cater to the needs of, differently abled, as we call them. But in the hospital setup, the definition goes way above that. It's because there are sick patients, there are people who are unconscious sometimes, and who are bedridden. You have to take care so that they don't fall down. And you could have a slip in the bathroom because you're anyways very slow in during your sickness, and you could land up with a problem that you didn't get admitted for in the first place, right? So patient safety is a huge area for healthcare and healthcare management as such. So in India, there's the Quality Council of India, under which there's an organization called the NABH, the National Accreditation Board for Hospitals and Healthcare Providers. So they publish standards on patient safety, and in that there's a whole discipline of facility management and safety, which is making safe spaces. How do you respond to emergencies like fire, earthquake, and such like? So they basically publish these standards, and people are expected to follow those guidelines and make safer, environments for for patients coming to hospitals. But I mean, the point here is that this is another major area for career development. So if you have an interest in hospitals and building hospitals, so even architects have importance in healthcare, right? Building safer structures. So essentially, it also goes to the point that students can think of careers which are to do with the engineering, the civil engineering side of medicine and health in hospitals as such, to make a safer environment as such. So I can't tell you that we are there, that if you go to any hospital, it's all there, right? I can't guarantee that, and you would have suffered this in some point of time. But I hope in the future, NABH grows to expand its coverage, and then also without even accreditation, people are generally very empathetic about patients and take up these safety initiatives as such. So definitely a very important area that people should focus on.
Thank you for that answer, sir. So what do you think are the must-have and the desirable skills and qualities that the student should build to build a bright career in this vast field of healthcare?
So yeah, so that's actually that can go into multiple hours if you start discussing that. But if you try to be simple, I'd like to think of this in 4 E's. Okay, from a personal perspective, it's like ethics, the first E. You need to be ethical, right? Treat every person with an ethical approach. The second is having equanimity. Equanimity would mean that even in the face of adversity, that you are able to keep up your calm. And because in healthcare it's required that you are faced with a lot of critical situations, and so you have to be very equanimous. So that's the second E. On the side of how you deal with others, right? It's 2 things. One is basically it's empathy. Having empathy for others, meaning empathy literally means that I could feel, how it is being in your shoe, right? So it's very important to be empathetic. And when you go to a doctor who's empathetic towards you, a nurse or anybody from a healthcare system, from the care team, you feel nice, right? Somebody who, essentially makes you feel at ease and stuff. So that's the third one. The fourth and the most important is excellence. Anything you do, you have to strive towards excellence, right? So it's like Baba Ranchhod Das, right? In 3 Idiots says, you pursue excellence, success will follow, right? It's very profound actually. So if if your career goal is to go and get a big salary, you may not land up there because nobody is wanting to give you a salary because you want it, right? But if your pursuit is to excel in what you do, they'll say, oh, this guy is excellent in what he does. Money doesn't matter. We'll give him the the salary that he or she requires, because she has excelled at her field. So I think that's the fourth E, excellence. So in that, it's being excellent in your domain, being excellent in your approach, in time management, because all of these are very critical skills. Time management is essential, right? You have to multitask, you have to do multiple things at the same time, you have to spend long hours, etc., etc. So I think those are the four E's. So on the personal side, like I said, ethics, equanimity. On the other side, it's basically empathy and excellence.
Thank you, sir.
Coming to the last question, there is an increasing focus on mental health of students. What action should we take to impress the current state?
Yeah, so back in the days, I mean, I passed my medicine, late 90s, early 2000. So there was, we used to have a lot of burnout. You heard of this concept within doctors called burnout. You get stressed by, seeing patients. So now that burnout is happening at a very early stage. Students, and I'm sure, you face the stress of exams, face the stress of your peers, teachers, the next viva that is coming up. So the thing is, and the competition is increasing rapidly. So this is taking a toll on students, right? So the requirement is that one actually looks at from a mental health perspective. One has to be cognizant of that, number one, right? So there's an organization called NCERT, the National Center for Educational Research and Training, right? They recently did a survey, and what they found is that 1 out of 2 students has the stress of exams, 50%, right? And it's actually a mental health problem, right? It's like 50%, huge. The second thing they found is that the stress is primarily not only related to exams, but it's also to do with the whole educational ecosystem, which is their peer. So you heard of the term called peer pressure, right? So it's not only educational peer pressure, it's about, fitting into a group, or how cool am I, and, am I being recognized in a group, etc. That also has a certain, it's like self-esteem, social kind of, issues. Then the other part is basically parents, like parents being a part of your problem, right? So if you were, say, not studying, you don't want your mother and father scolding you because you're not studying without asking what is the problem, right? So the thing is, what NCERT has done is they've published guidelines, and they've said that every institution needs to follow certain, few rules. It's like they should train teachers on identifying mental health problems with the students. Number 2, they should have counselors in the school, people who are trained in counseling. Then there are interventions. So either from an intervention perspective, it could simply be having a proper talk with between the teacher and the student. Then counselors to the student. Then counselors speaking to the parents, right? So that exchange. And the final stage, you go for therapy, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. So the thing is, like, the whole idea of therapy is that you're seeing a shrink or a mental doctor. That has to change. So if you have a pain in the stomach, what do? You go to a doctor, right? But if you have a mental health issue, what will you do? You'll go brood about it in your room and not talk to anybody. That has to change, because the brain and the body are pretty much the same. If you have a problem, the brain, which is one is a neurological problem, the other problem is that you go to a mental health professional. So that stigma has to be removed from mental health, and that applies to students as well. So I encourage students to speak about their challenges and seek professional help where required. But mental health is definitely a critical area of research and also intervention in the education system, from the teachers to students and everybody involved. And to start with, it starts with us, right, as students. Yeah.
Now we'll start with the rapid fire round. Your favorite book?
So I used to read a book called Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. But I mean, if you were to say favorite, I mean, that's obviously as a teenager, you have the teenage angst. But my all-time favorite book essentially is a collection of poems by William Blake.
Your favorite quote?
So, Auguries of Innocence is my favorite poem. And it says, to see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. So essentially, like the small and the big, they're all the same in one, super conscious. Yeah.
Your inspiration?
My inspiration, I would have to say, is my wife. Yeah, because she's a medical professional too, and she inspires me to reach new heights, and obviously takes care of me, my family, and her profession as well. But it's very inspiring to basically see her as an individual.
Best advice you got and by whom?
Yeah, my best advice was from a former colleague of mine, was to give up milk, because it has solved a big problem for me in terms of I recognize I had a food allergy, which is milk based. Actually, didn't come from a doctor, it came from an engineer.
Last movie you watched?
I was watching a movie called The Usual Suspects. It's like a 90s neo-noir crime kind of thriller. I've watched it about like 12 or 13 times actually, because it's a suspense movie. It's amazing. Usual Suspects.
One good habit everyone should have?
To make your bed when you wake up. It gets you started with organizing your life every day. Don't let your mother, your bai do that. Get up and make your bed yourself. It starts you off on a good track for the day.
Best mischief you did?
There's too many actually. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, obviously April Fools and back in the ragging days, it's not allowed these days, obviously. But I mean, it used to be in good humor. Back in medical school, holding up, we used to have these, bones, right? So holding up a skull to a junior and scaring him, something of those.
One last message for the current youth?
So the 4 E's, like I said, right? Make sure that pursue excellence and not a salary. And the other part is that life doesn't have to be so serious. Pursue your the things that excite you, and the best would be to get paid for doing what you love. My love is in music. I would someday want to be a musician, but I've begun to love data and health sciences as such. But yeah, I mean, eventually I will find that all of these will converge into one grand unified thing. So the message is, do what you love, be yourself, but make a change in others' lives. And healthcare, there's no better place to start than health.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a very insightful session, and we would definitely take a lot of inspiration from your interview. Thank you for being with us.